Imagine standing in front of one of the world's greatest paintings, a masterpiece believed to be worth millions. Experts admire the brushstrokes. Museum directors proudly display it. Collectors fight to own it. Governments protect it. And then, someone discovers it's fake. Not just fake, painted by one man. A man who fooled critics, collectors, and some of Europe's most respected art experts. He became rich. He became famous. And he nearly escaped justice entirely. This is the unbelievable true story of Han van Meegeren, the forger who convinced Europe that his paintings were priceless lost masterpieces. And in doing so, he pulled off one of the greatest art scams in history. To understand this story, we have to go back to the Netherlands in the early 20th century. Han van Meegeren was born in 1839. From childhood, he loved drawing and painting, but his father hated the idea. He wanted his son to become something respectable, an architect or engineer. Art, in his eyes, was not a real career. Yet Han continued painting, and he was talented, very talented. As a young man, he studied architecture, but spent most of his time creating artwork. Eventually, he chose painting. At first, things seemed promising. He won awards. People admired his technical skill, but there was a problem. The art world was changing. Modern art was exploding across Europe. Cubism, expressionism, abstract painting. Artists were experimenting in ways never seen before. Han hated all of it. He preferred the old masters. He painted in traditional styles. Critics considered his work outdated. They dismissed him as an imitator. Review after review described him as competent but unoriginal. For an artist, there are few things more painful than being ignored. And slowly, bitterness began growing inside him. Han became obsessed with one idea. One day, he would prove the experts wrong. He would show them that they didn't know true art at all. And eventually, he came up with an extraordinary plan. The target of his revenge was an artist named Johannes Vermeer. Today, Vermeer is considered one of history's greatest painters. But in the early 20th century, only around 30 of his paintings were known. That meant something very important. Experts believed there had to be more. Lost Vermeers. Hidden masterpieces waiting to be discovered. Collectors dreamed of finding one. Museums desperately wanted one. Experts spent years searching for them. And that created the perfect opportunity, because people often see what they desperately want to see. Han realized he didn't need to copy Vermeer. Copying could be detected. Instead, he would create entirely new paintings that looked like previously unknown Vermeers. In other words, he would paint masterpieces that had never existed and convince the world they were real. It was an incredibly dangerous idea, but Han was patient. He spent years studying Vermeer, every brushstroke, every color, every composition, every detail. He practically became a historian of Vermeer's work. He wasn't simply learning to paint. He was learning how to think like Vermeer. Creating convincing forgeries was much harder than painting beautiful pictures. Experts would test everything: the paint, the canvas, the materials, even microscopic details. So Han became part artist and part scientist. He bought old 17th century canvases. He carefully removed paintings already on them. Then he prepared his own surfaces. He mixed pigments using ingredients similar to those available during Vermeer's lifetime. But there was another problem. Fresh paint looks fresh. A 300-year-old painting looks old. How could he make new paint appear centuries old? Han experimented endlessly. Eventually, he found a solution. He mixed special chemicals into his paints. Then he baked the finished canvases in an oven. The heat hardened the paint. Afterward, he carefully rolled the canvas over cylinders, creating tiny cracks. The paintings suddenly looked ancient. It was genius. He wasn't merely painting fakes. He was manufacturing history. And finally, he was ready. In the 1930s, Han unveiled one of his fake Vermeers. Experts were amazed. Respected art historians examined it. Some called it one of Vermeer's finest works. The painting generated enormous excitement. Museums wanted it. Collectors wanted it. And most importantly, experts authenticated it. Han had done the impossible. He fooled the very people who once dismissed him. But instead of stopping, he kept going. One fake became several. Several became many. Each one brought huge amounts of money. He became wealthy. He bought expensive homes. He lived extravagantly. The critics who once mocked him now admired paintings that had secretly come from his own studio. It was revenge on an almost unimaginable scale. The entire art establishment had fallen for his deception, and nobody suspected a thing. Then came World War II. Europe descended into chaos. The Nazis looted art across the continent. They stole masterpieces from museums and private collections. Among the Nazi leaders, one man was especially obsessed with art. Hermann Göring. He spent enormous amounts acquiring paintings. At some point during the war, Göring obtained what experts believed was an authentic Vermeer. In reality, it was one of Han van Meegeren's forgeries. After the war ended, investigators traced the painting's ownership. Eventually, the trail led to Han. Authorities reached a shocking conclusion. They believed he had sold a priceless Dutch masterpiece to one of the most powerful Nazis. In the Netherlands, this wasn't just fraud. It looked like treason. Han faced severe punishment, possibly even death. For the first time in years, his greatest deception had become a deadly threat. Han knew he had only one chance to save himself. He made an astonishing confession. He told investigators, "I didn't sell a Vermeer to Göring. I sold him a fake." Nobody believed him. Think about that for a moment. For years, he had convinced the world his paintings were genuine. Now he was desperately trying to convince people they were fake. But the experts still insisted they were authentic. The situation was almost absurd. So Han made an extraordinary offer. He would paint another Vermeer, right in front of witnesses, under supervision. And he did. Day after day, investigators watched him work. Brushstroke after brushstroke. A new Vermeer appeared before their eyes. Finally, the truth became impossible to deny. The masterpieces were fakes. Han van Meegeren had fooled experts, museums, collectors, and even the Nazis. And now he had proved it. The charge of treason collapsed. Instead, he was convicted of forgery and fraud. Ironically, confessing to one crime saved him from another. Han van Meegeren died in 1947, shortly after his trial. But his legend only grew. Even today, historians debate his motives. Was he a criminal? Absolutely. Was he a talented artist? Without question. Was he driven by greed? Partly. But perhaps more than anything, he wanted revenge. He wanted to prove that experts could be wrong. And for years, he succeeded. His story exposes something fascinating about art itself. Why do we value paintings? Because they are beautiful? Or because an expert tells us who painted them? The fake Vermeers were admired before anyone knew they were fake. People called them masterpieces. They praised their beauty. Then the truth emerged, and suddenly, they became worthless. Nothing had changed about the paintings. Only the story behind them had changed. And perhaps that's why the tale of Han van Meegeren still fascinates us. Because it forces us to ask uncomfortable questions about art, expertise, and human psychology. Questions that remain unanswered. And maybe the biggest question of all is this: if a painting can fool the world's leading experts, how many masterpieces hanging in museums today are still waiting to reveal their secrets? Han van Meegeren remains one of history's most famous art forgers. Several of his forged paintings are now displayed in museums, not as masterpieces by Vermeer, but as evidence of one of the greatest deceptions in art history.